All right, welcome back to the Dirty Digger podcast. Today we have ArmadaFi, the token economy creator, with my guests, Tommy and Taylor Johnson, the most jacked, the most handsome coders in crypto. Welcome, boys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, heck yeah. All right, before we jump into it, I got to know, how does your mother tell you guys apart so that the rest of crypto can? Because there was glasses.
I'm the taller one, right, Ted?
Yeah, I guess a little taller. Tommy also needs glasses though, so I'd say glasses.
I'm like, where's the glasses? How the fuck is anybody supposed to know if there's no glasses?
Dude, I know. I've been wearing contacts all day. It's a rare thing. My eyes are dry. It's late here.
All right. I love that. Okay, so then give me a little intro, boys. A little bit about how you got into crypto and so the audience can tell you apart.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been pretty interested in crypto for a while. It really started when we saw the Ethereum white paper, but didn't totally grasp what it was going to be until kind of like near like their ICO and eventually their DevNet launch. But really what got us interested in, or at least got me interested in like DeFi and whatnot, is I did an internship at an investment bank and kind of saw all the red tape and resources needed to move assets around. And you know, when Ethereum came out, it's like, okay, you have like 5 lines of code and you can move an arbitrary amount of assets around. And so that to me was when the light bulb went off. It was like, wow, whatever I do next like needs to be in crypto. So that was around like 2015. And then in 2016, we started tinkering with some Solidity development and kind of just messing around on Ethereum.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Tommy, you?
Pretty much the same. I mean, Taylor and I always tinker together. We like to, make some hypothesis or dive into things and then bounce ideas around and prove who has the better understanding. So, we were going through Solidity in 2016. I remember we were writing some sort of PayPal-like interface. Obviously, nothing really took off, but we were just messing around part-time, getting up to speed. And so that's really where we dove in, and then got into Solana back in, I think it was 2020, right when they were launching mainnet. I mean, heard of it back in 2018, but really dove into Solana in 2020.
That's awesome. And you guys are hackathon participant winners through PsyFi.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, talk to me before we jump into Armada about the journey from PsyFi to Armada.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been like 3 years since we've been developing on this in the Solana ecosystem. Yeah, I mean, summer 2020 was when we like spun up our GitHub organization that we use. So we got a nice timestamp there. And we actually participated in the very first Solana hackathon. It was kind of just all over the place with how it was ran. And we created a third-party trusted Oracle system, like the very, very first building block of what would be needed to create something like Switchboard. But that got no love. And then a month later, Taylor was trying to automate an options trading strategy called a brokerage. They wouldn't give API access. So then I talked to him and was like, why don't we just build options into the blockchain? Like, we're having fun building on Solana. Let's just build options on Solana. So that was really the genesis of PsyOptions. And so we kind of broke down American style options and really what that means in a financial sense in traditional finance. And decided like, oh yeah, we could definitely build this. And so that's really where we started. And we had Serum was the first central limit order book on chain. And so we knew if we just build this option primitive, we could build a whole order book based option trading platform. So that was the very, very start.
It's interesting because it's not that PsyFi didn't work. It's that there's just no real demand for on-chain options currently. Like, we're still working through the perpetual curve. And like I had spoken to Tristan with Zeta, and they started as options too. And they're like, we got to pivot to perps before we can come back to options.
Yeah. I think we see the same thing, and I've seen the same thing where it's, traders get enough leverage from perps that they don't really feel the need for options. Like, options definitely have their time and place, but with all of the, most derivatives volume in crypto is all through perps. Deribit, their volume pales in comparison to regular perp trading platforms like Binance and OKX and whatnot. So yeah, you definitely don't see enough off-chain flow, and therefore you don't see a lot of on-chain flow either.
Fair enough. What was the aha pivot moment?
I mean, we were throwing a bunch of stuff at the walls. So we started out with American style option, order book based trading, then built some, I believe a European primitive was next. Then we started working with other teams getting into structured products. and ultimately acquired a group out of Singapore that was originally Tap Finance that came from a hackathon as well, to run structured products underneath the PsyFi DAO. And so then we started moving up the stack in the application layer. Needed to build Europeans because market makers wanted Europeans. And so there's just always been this like one thing after another. Then we launched a token because the foundation was obligated to launch a token. So we went through all that. And once you launch a token, there's so much other stuff you have to do. You have to build governance infrastructure. You have to build various infrastructure that the constituents or members of the DAO need to participate actively, or what they're asking for. And so there's all these integrations and all this other things you need to build and have to create an actual cohesive, long-standing ecosystem that's sustainable. And so that was really, I think, what has led to, ArmadaFi.
Awesome. All right, before we jump into ArmadaFi, because that was a good tee up, just give me an understanding of your guys' team kind of at this point.
So we have two different contributing entities. We kind of run this, I like to call it a hybrid decentralization model. We had originally tried to be all individual contributors in the early PsyFi days, but that's just not a great way to actually move very quickly. And so there's two core contributing entities, one in the US, one in Singapore, and we have in total about 11 full-time contributors. That's across mostly product and engineering, a couple designers, and then some BD and PM.
Sick. And has there been a raise? Will there be a raise? How can Dirt get access?
Oh, great question. We're actually really not sure what we're doing with Armada yet. We're really focused on product market fit, bootstrapping it right now, and working on the actual model to make sure this product is sustainable. I think as we built a ton of infrastructure because we needed it, or there was other teams that needed it. And so we're just, there's a very clear need for the infrastructure. Now we're trying to figure out what is this model, and is the value in the infrastructure? What's the sustainability? What's the moat? Or, is it more in the knowledge, and is there a white glove service? And, there's some open source infrastructure, but then there's this kind of support and, typical open source software model, like a Red Hat model, right? Where there's some sort of enterprise level support if you're actually going to pay. And so it's really hard to say what the future is on as far as raise until we nail down the model and something that's sustainable.
Well, that's sick. I like to hear that you guys got a lot of options. So these sound like good problems. Sounds like since you guys got started on this journey, you've done quite a lot between protocol acquisitions, legal work. I'm surprised I don't see a lot more gray hair, to be honest.
It's coming in, man. Don't you worry. It's starting to come in.
Yeah, we're blurring it. This is, AI.
Yeah, it'll be edited.
Oh, good. New narrative for Armada. AI. You heard it here first.
Yes.
Okay, this is perfect time then to discuss the protocol. I know you guys like to do tools for developers. You'd like to do tools for protocols. Like I said, the token economics. Talk to me about the market making vaults, the SPL staking, and this demultiplexer, which is a phenomenal word, by the way.
Yeah, I guess let's start with, so I guess the main thing about Armada to understand is that it's actually we've broken down three stages. There's the token launch stage, the token liquidity stage, and then the tokenomics stage, right? So step one is token launch, right? You need to actually launch your token, and there's a couple different ways that we support that. One is pool-based launches using the concentrated liquidity market making vaults. And the other one that we support is the liquidity bootstrapping curve, which has a couple different curves. One is similar to balancers, where the price starts high, decays over time, and then the floor price increases as more buying participants come in. And then the other is where price starts lower and actually ticks up over time. And so these are token auction mechanisms that allows for a more fair distribution. And then next comes your token liquidity, right? Once you've actually launched your token, you want to get some sort of liquidity on it so that way you can support trading, especially in on-chain venues. And so the concentrated liquidity market making program basically allows anyone to come in, deposit their tokens, basically delegates them to an institutional market maker that's running various strategies on the back end. And that market maker can then allocate liquidity to various positions at various lower and upper price bounds on top of an Orca whirlpool. And this is all done not all non-custodially. So that way, if it's a protocol that wants to supply liquidity, they could pull it back at any time. And I think that's very important because we know with PsyFi that we had a designated market maker and it was custodial. They went bankrupt, and there's a fair bit of Psy stuck in bankruptcy proceedings. So we think the non-custodial market making and protocol and liquidity is definitely the way to go here.
With that, like you mentioned, protocols could put their assets in. So like you could do treasury management, and they put this in here. And then you mentioned that there's market makers that could do the making. Is this like who decides who the market makers are? Would the treasury get to decide? Do you guys decide? Is it trusts? What's the nature behind the scenes?
Yeah, great question. We work with some institutional market makers that can be chosen to do so. But if a team or a DAO wanted to supply their own market maker, they could. It just takes a public address, and that delegates authority to them to be able to manage the positions. So you can either bring a market maker or work with us, and we'll introduce them to some market makers.
So that's cool. Like we're just iterating on the first step, and the second step is you could have a new protocol comes in. They decide to go do LBP or LBC, which I'll get you to give kind of examples of when each would be best. And then part 2 comes in, and then you can say they could put their own treasury back into your guys' protocol, and users that say like I went into Cypher, and if it worked out, I could have put my Cypher back into the protocol. And then you have an option where maybe you guys build an interface where it's like you can pick and choose the way you would pick and choose a validator. You could pick and choose a market maker, maybe based on their ranking or their performance or whatever metrics you deem important. So that's like the first 2 pieces of this pie.
Yeah. The market maker leaderboard is an interesting one and something we've definitely thought about. We don't know how much we want to focus on retail participation in the vaults right now. I think like the main focus is let's get the protocol's liquidity owned by the institutional market maker. That way, it's like a very clear directive of what the market maker's goals are. Right? It's very different when you have people supplying liquidity at different price points versus you have one larger entity, the DAO, that is like supplying liquidity.
Basically, we're still learning and iterating on some of that stuff.
And
probably adding other support so that these market making vaults are not just purely on concentrated liquidity protocols or pools. They could be used for other venues, and so you kind of have this holistic, non-custodial delegation to market make across the entire Solana ecosystem.
That's cool. I was listening to the podcast you guys did before Breakpoint that they released on Validated with Austin. And you mentioned one really sweet thing, and you were talking about the ability for protocols to show fees and tokenomics on the dashboard. And I've been doing research for quite a while, and it is very hard to get this information a lot of times. There's a lot of black boxes out there. And if your guys' toolkit is promoting transparency from the start, I'm like, Boner City, boys. Let's go.
All right, so that brings us to Taylor talked about stage 1 and 2 of Armada, right? And that's actually stage 3.
Oh, nice.
That Boner City transparency. So the focus is once you have you launch a token, you get some liquidity on that token. Now there needs to be utility, there needs to be governance, there needs to be whatever you're trying to what is the purpose of this token? Why do you have it? What are you governing? What is the utility, etc.? And so there was really no good holistic way to get into governance and staking and create a clear pipeline for token holders or DAO members of if I want to be heavily involved in this community, where should I be? And so we created a suite of programs that has a staking component that plugs into SPL governance, so kind of streamlines that. A question of do I stake or do I participate in governance? No, you do both. And then the other piece is the demultiplexer program. And really what that does is allows some sort of community or ecosystem to ingest fees or revenue or whatever else they have into a single address. And then that automates distribution of those rewards to different actions. And right now out of the box it's going to support a number of actions like buying and sending somewhere, or buying and adding protocol owned liquidity on an Armada vault, or just a simple transfer to a treasury deposit. And like you can see that it'll have all these like puzzle pieces that can be crafted to create more complex tokenomics ecosystems. And the UI will display, the information of like where things are coming from and where they're going. So people can kind of see a flow diagram of what does this system look like.
That's super cool. It's like you could embed Quantum from Solana FM as like, because they built that sort of like, it shows you where it goes and it breaks down everything, like that kind of a style.
That was the inspiration. Cool. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean it's sweet. I love it. Right? It really. Yeah. It's the kind of stuff that Solana needs. Speaking of the podcast with Austin, you mentioned 7 figures sunk into governance. I imagine that sunk cost results in where you guys are now with this like product suite, is realizing the things that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, like when you think about the man hours, the engineering time, and all that kind of stuff to create your own governance infrastructure and interface with SPL governance, get up to speed on that, realms, the user interface, all that kind of stuff, like it is a serious amount of time and effort to like build something from scratch. And so that's really where we get into this. There's very clear need. I think Solana ecosystem is definitely early compared to most, and a lot of people haven't really thought about this. There's definitely a small group that has been thinking about this and contributing to realms and all that kind of stuff. But when you really dive into it and try to figure out like, okay, we launch a token, like how do we get governance? And you have some bespoke need or idea of how your ecosystem should function, like you're going to be sinking 6 figures plus to like just make that one, like to achieve that one goal. So it's very clear, like more modular and flexible approaches need to be taken. But then also things that can be, used for a wider audience. And so we talked to at Breakpoint a bunch of teams as we started unveiling Armada more broadly. Mm-hmm. And it's very clear that people have reinvented the wheel over and over again, from staking contracts to vesting contracts to governance integrations, you name it. So the goal is for Solana teams to really stop reinventing the wheel, stop burning runway on doing the same thing over and over again, and create more flexible infrastructure for everyone.
So Realms is a governance public good?
Realms is a governance public good UI, originally started by Mango and Solana Labs in collaboration, which we've also contributed widely to. And our current Armada infrastructure is going to work complementary to Realms. Realms will still be the primary place to actually go and vote, view different votes, view breakdowns of votes, manage the actual SPL governance treasury or the assets that are sitting in a treasury. But our systems will plug in. So if you want to make a change to the demultiplexer, like tokenomics interface, right, you can imagine where you're actually moving those puzzle pieces around and changing flows and percentages and then just clicking to actually add a proposal. And then once you actually want to go vote, you go to Realms. So we're not replacing Realms, at least not yet. We'll see if there's better, more modular ways to create Realms, because it's definitely, we've talked to everyone in the ecosystem. There's room for improvement. We all know it. It's just what is the best path forward for Realms and governance too. So.
Yeah, governance is one where participation has always been very low. And so how do you get users to participate? And maybe it's as simple as like, maybe they don't want to participate. So you make delegation of authority sexy, gamify delegation of authority. Give somebody an NFT and be like, every time you delegate a certain percent, your stature goes up. And you'd be like, look, I'm a delegator. I vote. I don't know. But yeah.
100%. I know a lot of people talk about like rewards plugs in for SPL governance. Nothing has really come to fruition. But even when we talk about or say things are lacking in SPL governance, it's like the delegation, like the way it works, it's on an individual basis. And it was really designed for people who have a cold wallet and want to delegate to a hot wallet so they could vote on the go or not have to pull their cold wallet out. It wasn't designed for delegation programs where you say these are the top 10 community members that if you aren't going to be participating in governance, you should delegate to them and vote. And so the user interface for the people being delegated to and delegating doesn't actually jive with that that goal. But the Marinade team and Solana Labs are collaborating on improving that, which is another interesting thing that's coming to governance soon. But like you can see that, just to achieve your delegation idea is a significant lift from an engineering standpoint.
Interesting. Yeah, above my pay grade. All right, before we get too deep into the weeds, I want to spin back a bit and you guys tell me a bit more about like the LBC and the LBP, just to give people an understanding of, when is each application best used? Because I'm sure as we start to go forward, there's going to be more instances coming to them with these token economies, with new protocols launching through your guys' tooling. So give them an idea of like what they can expect.
Yeah, I think it really depends on, what the team's end goal is and like what stage the team is at. Right? Like some teams might have a goal where it's like, hey, we just want to distribute all of the tokens or, all of the mint supply, and we don't necessarily care about raising money. We just need to get into our hands of our community so that way our community can help drive the DAO forward or whatnot, right? Like that's a very different approach than something where it's like, we need to try and raise $2 million so we can have, a year or two of runway and what have you. So, and then the other thing on top of that is not only what is their goal with the token launch, is it distribution, raising funds, a combination of both. You also need to understand like what stage the team is at. Do they have a product? Do they have end users? Have they done marketing? What is their following like? So that way you can kind of use that to gauge, what kind of buying demand are they going to have? And then once you kind of have an understanding of that, you can determine what kind of curve structure you want. And so if it's something like where you're like, oh, we really need tokens we just want tokens to sell out and get the supply out there, maybe you want kind of like the balancer LBP style, which we're calling like VLBP, since it's not actually using pools underneath, where the price starts high and decays over time as there's no buyers and ends lower. But then as people come in and purchase, it moves the price up. But you could set the decay very rapid, so that way, if there's no one that's coming in and saying, if there's people that are watching it and saying, hey, this is overvalued right now, they just wait till the quickly for the price to decay, and they'll come in later when they feel like it's, more appropriately priced. If you're just saying, hey, we want to raise funds, maybe that's where you try like the LBC style where it starts lower and ends higher. And that way people know that like, hey, the best time to get into this auction is only going to be at the beginning. And so you're going to see people try to jump in and prices it's either going to sell it really fast or probably, will just kind of slowly tick higher and not sell out. So again, like it kind of depends on what the project's end goals are. And that's something that, when projects come talk to us, we'll work with them to understand what stage they're at and kind of help them like think through these different curve types and then also the different parameters.
What do you do for like anti-bot prevention? Can you set metrics on like you can only contribute 5,000 USDC per person? Like talk to me a little bit about that, because it seems to be something that plagues all of crypto.
Yeah, I mean it's something that we've been thinking about a lot with the curve style launches we have. There's you can't really mitigate bots. I think it's more of you need to design your token launch mechanism around bots. And the curve style one is a good one because the tokens that are being distributed can be what are called like voucher tokens. So it might not actually be like the actual SPL token of the project. So like this is what Cypher did. Rather than the end user receiving the Cypher token, they received a Cypher voucher token, which then would be redeemable for Cypher once the auction is completed. And so what that does is you can kind of like understand, like bots are less likely to spin up like Orca pools or Radium pools for these voucher tokens than they would be for, the actual like Cypher token, a regular token. And so that's one way we look at it is kind of do some mitigation through, using voucher tokens. I think Token 2022 or SPL Token Plus, I don't even know what they're calling it these days. Super Token, I've seen a million names, but whatever that program is going to be called, we're also evaluating different hooks and plugins and extensions that'll work for that. So we've been thinking about, how we could write, an SPL token hook, whatever the heck it's called, write a hook that will like prevent transfers or selling and literally only support purchasing through certain venues of a token, right? And then what that would allow is it help mitigate if you do a pool-based launch that's like on top of Orca pools, rather than being able to sell into the pool during the auction, you'll only be able to purchase the token. And then after a designated point in time, selling will commence. And then that way it's like you don't diminish the buying power during the duration of the auction. Only when the auction time is done will selling be able to like actually happen. And so you can kind of have this like clean cutoff of here's the point in time where we're raising funds and distributing tokens. Here's a point in time where people can actually start selling out of it.
I think there's like multiple like reasons a bot would come in, right? And you have to put yourself in the mindset of the bot. You also have to talk to the team about what their goals are, right? And you see bots that snipe early and then sell out as soon as like price moves up when they can. More typical in those pool-based launches. But if it's a curve, more curve-based launch and they just buy in early and push the price up and they're paying for those tokens just like anyone else, like is there harm in that? So you kind of have to like really, like when you're thinking about launch mechanisms, kind of think about all the reasons a bot would come in and whether there's harm or not. And then like to your point of could you limit the amount you could buy? Like, well, people could spin up infinite addresses. So unless you're doing some sort of like off-chain mitigation,
like a whitelist kind of deal.
Yeah, but even then you have to like validate something that like cannot be forged easily. So that you can't really do that. Like limiting, like we have that ability, but it's not really a bot.
Right.
It doesn't really get around bots.
I think a lot of it is just like education. Educating participants like, hey, these are the potential risks. If you see price shoot up, maybe just wait a minute and let it come back down. Like a lot of people probably just don't know that. They come and they FOMO in and they're like, damn it, oxygen got me again.
Damn Oxy.
Oxy got me good. Okay, that's sweet. You brought up Cypher. I have some of those sweet Cypher vouchers in my wallet. I know that Barrett and the team didn't get as much as they wanted to raise. Can you tell me any lessons you guys learned from maybe the first two launches? I know of Flowmatic, and if it kind of gives you anything in the future you might do differently, or is it just it's out of your hands at that point? You provide the tooling, and it's whatever they can do with their communities.
So I mean, on the Flowmatic one was like the bot was a big thing on the pool based. That's where like token 2020, if we're doing a pool base where we can't change the underlying infrastructure, we would need something like token 2022 hooks to mitigate selling for a period of time, or a custom like fork and tweaked venue for the pools. So I think like you could recreate similar like tranche based sale using the curves, because the curves can actually be piecewise. Didn't really mention this. You can actually like put LBPs, LBCs, and have different curves that start at different times. So you could kind of
you could put them. You could have multiple, like you could use LBP and LBC together,
or multiple VLBP curves, as we're kind of calling it these days. That like then changes the next day or something like that. So you can create like very complex, structures.
You could have you could be cheeky and have like the bot section and then like the buyer set,
Oh yeah. I mean, Mad Lads like did a whole honeypot. So of course we're talking to them. How did you guys honeypot? There'll definitely be some of that cheekiness in there. Maybe where the UI's flipping out addresses and all that stuff. So, for all those bots listening, beware.
You'd have to like solve a CAPTCHA before being able to like buy or something like that.
Or
the
just
button, maybe the button switches between buy and sell. Ooh. Yeah. Anyways, that's fun.
There's lots of ways to get them back. But so I think like on the Flowmatic one, it was really like the pool base was interesting because it's very clear. We're like, this is the first one. Like, bots really going to be paying attention? Like, no, of course they are. So they jumped in and that definitely took some steam out. But we quickly like worked with a team of like mitigation and migrating off the auction into like a regular pool, and things like recovered from there. So I think we were like, I think everyone was good being quick on their feet, but we learned a lot from that. And on the Cypher one, I mean, it worked flawlessly from like the tech and infrastructure perspective. And, you know, raising at that point in time, 340, I think it was, thousand. I mean, it's like pretty good, like nothing to, you know, bat an eye at. So like, I think we really, I think it was just tough with, you know, the headwinds that they were facing, and just kind of starting from, you know, a negative position. And luckily, like, the infrastructure had all the tools to make it easy to kind of know who bought how much and reimburse. It's all, there's a log, there's an index, things like that. So I think all in all, like, we were all pretty proud of how it went, even though it wasn't like the ideal outcome. I don't know, Taylor, if I missed anything.
No, I think the one thing I'd say on the Cypher launch was that, like, that we learned is, you know, I think they did it over a 2-day period, which is pretty long, right? Like, we all have short attention spans, and in crypto, we have very, very, very short attention spans. And so to, like, be able to start an auction date one day and expect people to come back and check it, you know, on the date, I think that's pretty tough. Right? You either need, you know, some sort of like notification system, or you know, you need retention systems, right? We do that in like Web 2 world. We send push notifications and emails to get people back in their applications, and we don't really have that in Web 3 in like a comprehensive way. And so I think, depending on what you expect your demand to be, if you don't expect like outsized demand, you should probably shorten the auction window to something where you expect people to come back and check. The other thing was that I don't think many participants really understood the mechanism and like what the time decay was doing to prices. I think there were some people, and I'm like regurgitating what I heard through the Cypher team, but some people were like, why is it showing price going down? And it's really just showing price decay. The UI was showing price decay over time, assuming there were no bids. But with bids coming in, it keeps price afloat and even pushes price up. And then the interesting thing with the Cypher one was you saw a ton of volume. Most of the volume happened within the first 30 minutes and within the first hour of the launch, which might have been like not great, right? Like, if you expected the auction to sell out very fast, then maybe that is the right strategy, you know, given that game theory. But if you don't expect the auction to sell out based on how much money they're trying to raise and how many tokens they're trying to sell, you know, then maybe the optimal strategy is to wait for the initial buyers to come in and wait for the time decay to take effect. And that's kind of what we saw in the Cypher was, you know, there wasn't enough demand to match the supply they were trying to sell. And so those that bought it at the end, you know, would have gotten a, you know, more favorable price had they not refunded everybody and actually like launched a token, right?
I like a lot of what you talked about is like UI UX, right? And on the one hand, shamefully, I didn't realize that the reimbursement had happened until like 2 weeks later. I was like, oh yeah, I wonder. And I logged back in. I see the voucher, and then I went on the Twitter, and I was like, oh, they refunded it. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. But like, no push notifications and your attention span, and you know, I went after a bunch of other different. Yeah, you just go after a bunch of different things, and you totally forget about it. And then on the other hand, like the UI, I think like a lot of what needs to happen, and you talked about people go to, you know, Cypher's page, which you guys help empower, but you're on their page. There needs to be more information. Like, I think at a base level, the user needs to come there and go, I know that, you know, here's the full tokenomics picture. This is the pie you're looking for. Like, really dummy it down on what it means and where it's going. Because I think a lot of times you go to the page, and like when I first showed up, I think like the graph wasn't there, and then it did show up. It's missing a lot of information, and then requires a lot of trust, especially if you don't know much about bots. So I don't know how you can simplify that experience via pictographs and diagrams, or like, you know, but I think there's a lot of room to improve and innovate on that feature.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you first came there, the graph, that was a little UI bug that we like quickly fixed and delivered to them. But yeah, it's very bare bones, and I think you're right. It needs to have more information from the team about what's interesting and why they're launching this thing and all that. So I think like we started moving in a direction with like the market making vaults, and we'll go in a similar direction with this other infrastructure, is where we have some sort of metadata that can be tied to the like actual token metadata. And so it's like Armada's metadata, and it can include that information about the token, direct link to the demultiplexer UI, the tokenomics and demultiplexer UI if they have it, and their docs and translations and all that kind of stuff. So that is definitely something that we've really started thinking about since all of that.
I mean, it's a sales funnel, right? It needs to be sexy. Yeah. I want to go there and be like, whoa, look at this casino. If I just spin this lever and it hits 777s, I've made it happen, people, it's like you said, our attention spans. Like if you go there and you're like, this is attractive, I'll be like, I got to give it this money. Look at this. This is amazing. Yeah. But
the only thing is like a lot of that has to come from that team, like from the team, right? Like we're going to do our best to like tee it up and provide the tools and like the streamline it. So like, this is where you can enter this information, X, Y, and Z. Yeah. But like the team needs to be the one to like make it pop and be like, what would really make our thing stand out is if we moved this here and did that. Like, that's the kind of stuff where like we'd be happy to support that. We're just, building the bare bones and then letting others come in and ask for things and we contribute there, just driven by their demand.
I got it. One of the next question I was going to ask you guys is going to be around like partnerships and integrations. And then like if you thought about hackathons and going after hackathon participants and being like, look, this is what we're building, you should build through it. Just put a hackathon sponsorship out there and say, come build the tooling to help make launches better for other people. So some team can come in and be like, we're going to be like the interface layer. You guys are the background tooling layer. And then that way they can come in, they can get your guys' tool for all of the 3 steps. And then they can use this other protocol to make it sexy, right?
100%.
Because maybe that's what's needed.
Like our goal is like we know our bread and butter, like we are engineers and product people. Like we are not the best at growth and marketing and hype. So if someone wants to come in and build like people say, oh, Armada's a launch pad. Like we say like, no, it's not a launch pad. It's really just this infrastructure. Launchpad requires like marketing and that sex appeal, right? Like, which is again, not what we're good at. So if someone wants to, jump into a hackathon and build a launchpad on top of this infrastructure, we'd be all for it and, happy to help out with the learning curve.
Yeah, I like that. Any other, I follow you guys around and I see your breadcrumbs all over the place. Any other sneaky integrations that we can know about and where can we find them?
Well, let's see what breadcrumb with. What do you got so far?
God, I can't even remember the obscure place I went. It was like it was like a DAO. I can't even remember the name of it, but I was like scrolling through the potential token launch, and then I saw like Armada LBP at the bottom, and I was like, what the shit is that? I was the first guy in the Discord to say hello. Why don't I know about this?
Nice. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe someone's promoting that they're going to use it without us knowing.
Oh, really? That's good.
Maybe. I don't know. The big one that was announced, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I'm losing track of time here. But it was like Bonk is going to be using some of the tokenomics infrastructure. So the staking and the demultiplexer and then eventually layering in governance. So we've kind of been just jamming with them to drive out that product further. So staking is currently under audit, so which is why like it hasn't been pushed yet, but we're getting there. What other partnerships? I mean, there's a lot.
Psy is a big one, right?
Yeah, Psy is a big one. I mean, Psy is going to use it. I mean, this is why we built this stuff to start.
When you say Psy is going to use it, you mean that you're going to implement changes to the Psy token to use all of the like Armada tooling? Like, talk to me about that change. What are you offering the Psy token as a change?
So we did a couple things. We had like long vesting schedules over like 4 years on the token from primary listing. We wanted to shift to use staking as the plug into governance, and that's part of like Armada's suite. But to do that, we, didn't want these people who are like stuck in some old governance or realm, and then, their tokens are locked there for another 2 years or year and a half, whatever it is. So we did a couple things like so far is like accelerate the vesting for everyone. And then we are working on actually putting up like the own staking and tokenomics site for, Psy and its DAO, and creating a new SPL governance and kind of basically migrating our governance infrastructure to be from like the Psy token to the stake Psy token, which has these, like all the Armada tooling powering it.
Sweet. All right. The favorite part of the podcast for me, and I follow you guys around. I know what's going on. You can't hide anything from dirt. Strategic partnerships. I saw a tweet the other day from Gunny from Hero Network talking about Bonk integrating with Hero. And I was like, that's interesting. And then now you guys talk about how Armada is helping them with their staking program. I want to know more about your guys' Hero partnership. I love Gunny and Caitlin. Give Dirt the goodies.
I'm like, Taylor, you want to take this one? I'll jump in. I guess I was the one like interfacing all the whole time a while ago. I mean, where this started was like, oh my God, 9 months ago. Yeah, 9 months ago at this point in time. And there was like there's people building on the Hero Network.
Yep.
Lots of interesting teams and products building on top of their, dexterity infrastructure and whatnot. And so Gunny approached Taylor and I asking like, hey, you guys are around the ecosystem a lot. Like, you guys are deep in the weeds. Like, does any of this infrastructure exist? Like, this team comes from, one of these teams comes from the EVM world and they're familiar with, balance or other things. And we were just like, no, it's not there. And so we're like, let's take a step back and like, why do you need this? Like, what else is there? What is this team trying to accomplish? And that's what really kind of led to like, hey, let's build some of this infrastructure together. As we started building, it was just more of like hey, just build this and deliver it to us, and we'll give the DAO some Hero. And then it really developed into its own like platform, because we started building like, okay, we need some sort of launch mechanism. But like beyond that, like, hey, this team needs staking. This other team needs staking too. Like, is there any of this stuff? And we're just like, no, like, we need this. We've been building it for Psy, so like let's productize this. And so it's just kind of like evolved into this, working relationship so far, where we do the product and engineering stuff, and they are kind of BD and marketing. And like I said, like our bread and butter is product and engineering. Like, we're not the best at BD and marketing. Gunny and Caitlin are the opposite, right? Like, so it's pretty great working with them on that front. And so we're, with like some of the Armada infrastructure, right? Like there's a lot of ways that this infrastructure and platform, depending on how it develop, like, no matter which way it develops in the future, as I said, we're still like iterating on, the model and how we make it sustainable and all that. But the demultiplexer can be used to split fees between different ecosystems, or establish more on-chain partnerships, or you name it, right? Like there's a lot of ways to make sure this collaboration is not just make sure it's transparent on-chain too. But we're still just trying to find that product market fit and the right model, and establish the moat before we like lock anything on-chain. Because once it's on-chain, it's engineering lift to change it, right?
Mm-hmm. So do we consider them teammates, contractors, advisors? We prefer no labels in this open relationship.
Collaborators, teammates. We talk all the time. Like, we are just sharing, insights into what teams are asking for, or what we're seeing related to like tokenomics infrastructure, and of course, all these various ecosystems or token ecosystems inside Solana want to use this infrastructure. So it's not beneficial to like share as much. That's definitely something we've learned over the last 3 years. So we don't reinvent the wheel a million times.
Totally. Taylor, what do you see in the Hero ecosystem, which for anybody that doesn't know is like gambling and derivatives infra, that excites you the most in regards to like dev, tooling, whatever?
I mean, I think we're starting to see a lot of teams build on top of dexterity, which is awesome. And I think that's really exciting, right? Like having a unified liquidity layer for a bunch of different applications. I think that makes the developer experience of getting started, like if you wanted to build some sort of exchange like experience, or even some like betting experience or whatnot, it makes it a lot easier on the developer side. Like I can tell you firsthand that trying to attract liquidity or work with market makers and whatnot is extremely difficult. Also, like it's time consuming and can be expensive. Sometimes market makers want to be paid to provide liquidity, and their fees are kind of outrageous. That I think what Dexterity is doing is, and the Hero team in general doing, is awesome, and it's just going to like improve a lot of the infrastructure on Solana.
Does dexterity power your guys' market making functions for Armada?
No, not
Or
right now,
can it?
because the liquidity right now comes from. I don't know if it could right now because it's like the liquidity comes from the protocol, like protocol and liquidity or depositors and whatnot. And it's right now only supplying liquidity onto Orca whirlpools. So it's only for concentrated liquidity pools. So right
So
now it
like
would
the
not compose the dexterity.
yeah, and
Got
like
you.
how we talked about like options being like tough and people kind of regressing from options, right? Different teams, like
Hmm.
as we've learned, like there's a very clear like sequential order to these things. Like there's no point in having options markets if there's no like spot volume. And so like the market making vault is focused on spot right now, but eventually, right, there could be some sort of integration into a dexterity, but how you work with that collateralization is also, that's a devil in the detail.
It would be like an extra added piece. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Derivatives versus your guys' spot side. All right.
Yep.
So it's net beneficial for you both when Hero merger to Armada token.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. You have to poke and prod Gunny and ask him about that too.
Oh, I
Um,
do. Oh, I do. Monthly.
nice. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Nothing's off the table. Nothing's really on the table. We're like, let's build something sustainable and establish a moat first, and then you can move those puzzle pieces down the road.
A fair and respectable answer. Okay, we're getting close to the end. I got one more real zinger of a question before we wrap this up. You guys don't like point systems. Why? And what do you think is a better way to reward community?
I mean, the main issue we have with with points is just the lack of transparency. I mean, I think points are an interesting thing to do before you have token, but it's kind of like an IOU, but I'm not going to tell you how much I owe you, right? And so it's a kind of a lot of like mysterious of, ooh, how much am I going to get for this potential airdrop? Is there going to be a potential airdrop, right? And with points, it's like very unknown. And so we kind of think that there's definitely better systems out there, and one would be actually launch your token and then use your token to power your incentive strategy. And then if your concern is, oh, like we don't want to just airdrop regular tokens, we think there's a lot of other incentive mechanisms like option liquidity mining or option incentive that can actually be more beneficial, because then it doesn't actually have immediate selling pressure when those tokens get distributed. And so that's something that we've been experimenting for a while, and even wrote like back in like 2021 and a whole blog post on it through was around option liquidity mining. And so we think there's definitely better incentive strategies than points. It's kind of just a
Yeah,
stopgap for when you have a token.
yeah. I mean,
Fair play.
points are a number in a database, right? But like tokens are numbers in database, just the blockchain global state machine database. So I don't see why you can't use tokens. The only thing is it creates obfuscation for the actual end user that can only benefit the team or early like VCs that have some sort of token warrants. Because obviously you can, put points and attract interest and all that stuff, but then, pay everyone, very minimal tokens and not dilute, VCs in team. And so it can, I don't know. You can just, it's not transparent. There's a lot of shady
Yep.
stuff that could happen.
Yep. You can look on the Jito leaderboard and look at first place. and see a little hint at that, and be like, oh.
I'll give him
Double-
credit. He was probably like
double dipping, are we?
Probably an early investor that just like was supporting and had a ton of soul. So yeah, that one.
It's like, I know exactly what to do in this
That's
situation.
Yeah, that part's nice that it probably tried a little bit. Like it's not even like the distribution of points. It's what comes after the points. Like, okay, great. We see the leaderboard of points, but like there's no actual way of quantifying how much does points mean in like the governance token or in the in the token or in dollar terms and whatnot. And like that's the real issue. It's not the distribution of points. It's what the token being distributed is after they get rid of points.
Yeah, like let's say you're an airline loyalist, right? And you only fly United, and they're like starting their points program from scratch, and they're like, you're going to accumulate points for 6 months, and then you'll actually be able to use those points because once we actually turn it on, like you can use it. And you're thinking like, 1 point equals 1 cent. That's kind of what airlines tend to do. But they're like, no, we're going to pay you 1/10 of a cent. Yeah. And you just switched your loyalty to that airline, and they rugged you on like the normal rate of conversion.
But you only found out the conversion rate after the 6 months.
Yeah. I pick up what you're saying, and I do agree. The one difference between airlines, though, and a lot of these protocols is at the end of this season, I usually get my funds back, unless I've traded my way down to 0. So it's like, I don't get the money back I paid for a frickin' airliner. And I guess I'll wrap it by saying that Dirt is airdrop agnostic. He likes point systems. He also is open to options innovation. I know the guys like on Tapioca DAO, they're doing like the OTAP. And so I do like that you give the protocol. And I mean, and you guys are literally in the token economics ring. You're all about designing whatever they want. You don't really, if they want a point system, take a point system. That's your call. And so I think the exploration of like options and then the protocol own liquidity portion of that, I think can go a long way.
Yeah, I don't want to discount like that points have had their success, in actually achieving their goal of marketing and bringing people in. At the end of the day, you're just trying to see what sticks with the end user. And if points is it, like great. We knowing that is, a realistic path. We're working on more improved airdrop infrastructure for Armada, so these people can have a Pyth-like airdrop claiming or infrastructure and UI without having to do that themselves. So again, Armada's like trying to take care of everything, no matter like what path these teams or organizations choose.
Love it. All right, gentlemen, we're closing in. Let people know where to find you on Twitter, all the goods.
I find Armada at ArmadaFi on Twitter, and I think the last thing I'll say is, for all the Solana developers and teams out there, let's stop burning our runway, reinventing the wheel. So come talk to us, and let's build some modular infrastructure.
Nice, well said.
Sick. All right, gentlemen, my favorite question. What's the one thing that's kept you sane through the bear market until now? Neither one of you can say lifting weights because it's already abundantly clear.
I was just...
I seen that bicep flex as he came across.
I'm like, come on, dude. Like, honestly, it's the one thing.
If you're not lifting and you're not coding, you're probably not doing anything.
Gotta get out and do something.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you for coming on the podcast today. Take it easy.